All right. This is attempt number 3 to record.
Third time's a charm.
And this is our last attempt today. So if this doesn't work, we'll see you another day. And you won't even know it. You won't even know. But it's snowing on April 4th. It is
Yeah.
snowing in New Hampshire. So.
And it's the gross snow. Like, it's not fun, pretty,
No.
fun to play in snow. It's just wet,
Sleet.
heavy, crazy wind.
It's like coming sideways.
Yeah.
It's just bull crap. It's just bunch of manure. It was 60 degrees like 2 days ago.
All of my plants are coming up. I'm kind of concerned about them. Like, my lilacs are budding, and I'm really nervous that they're not going to survive this. But you know what? It is what it is.
Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of funny because I just left all the kids' toys out in the backyard. And there's a big like red ball that's just blowing around in the fence backyard. It's just kind of funny to watch.
It might be there,
Yeah, we'll see.
Might be there tomorrow.
We might need to get a new one, but it's a red ball, so whatever.
Yeah.
We are. I said to Amy before we recorded, I have this has been a theme for a lot of conversations that I've had with clients, but also kind of like I don't know if undertone is the right word, but it's been like embedded into a lot of our recent episodes. And so I figured I would do an explicit conversation about the difference between skills and solutions. And the way that I frame this is actually through a teaching light. So we start with a story.
Gather round, kids.
Gather around, children. Here we go. Speaking of which, I just got an email that I can go in and do story time at Levi's Daycare preschool next week. So that's
what book are you going to do?
I have no idea. I'm going to let
Oh
him
my God,
pick.
I have so many. Oh.
Yeah, I'm going to let him pick.
So many thoughts on this.
It's very likely that he's just going to pick a book that's like a ton of information about dinosaurs that's like super thick and not at all. Like, it's just going to be me showing this is a Dinocaris. Dinocaris lived in this thing and had razor sharp claws. And
I have a book called We Don't Eat Our Classmates, and it's a dinosaur going into a regular school. And it has to be like, you have to explain to the dinosaur that, yes, those are technically your food source, but we can't eat them because they're your classmates. So if you want to borrow that, you just let me know.
I may borrow that. He would really like that. We have a couple funny dinosaur books. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of funny books, actually. But speaking about high school, high school classrooms. So for those of you who don't know, who maybe haven't listened to much of this podcast before, I was a high school math teacher for 5 years. And I did, that was my whole degree. I did a master's in it. So I did a year-long internship. So it was kind of 6 years that I taught. And I had grand ideas that I was going to revolutionize math education in America.
The dream of all first-year teachers.
The wonderful naivete of a 22-year-old who hasn't been jaded to the way the world works anymore. Now, I will say that I was very lucky in a lot of ways where I landed for teaching. And I think I've said this before, that I've never really had a bad boss, which is pretty astounding. And part of the reason that I went where I went to teach, I had a few different offers, was I took the one that paid the least and was the furthest away because I wanted to work for the principal there. I had a couple people who I trusted who knew him, who vouched, was like, hey, how you read him was how he really is. And because I had met him, and then how I read him was he said to me, during my interview process. I don't remember if it was like he just like popped in, and it was pretty wild. He like popped into the interview like as a drive-by. He like wasn't in there for most of it. He came in for like 5 minutes, and then he basically offered me the job like in the room, which never happens in education. Like, no, that does not happen. And the people in the room kind of were trying to walk it back a little bit because they're like, we kind of want to talk about this, Frank. But he was like, we're gonna, we're gonna give you a chance to work here if you want to, and I understand if you decide to go somewhere else, but like, you'll have a spot here. And they're like, you've been here for all of 30 seconds. Right. And
they had a better idea of who you really were.
Yes, he hadn't even heard my Mr. Feeney story, which was I was going to be like Mr. Feeney.
That's a great story, start to finish.
That was the entire story. No, but I had a phone interview with him, and he had chatted with a couple of the people that we had mutual relationships with. One of them is he's the head coach at Exeter High School football. Bill Ball, who's a legend in the state of New Hampshire, like has a stadium named after him, has had a stadium named after him for like the last almost 20 years. And he's still the coach. Like, you know how baller you gotta be to like be currently the coach and have a stadium named after you? Like, that's normally like an honorary thing after the fact. And he was like 50 and they were like, we're gonna name this after you.
He's also just the nicest man.
One of the most genuinely generous people I've ever met with his time and his energy. And there's a reason why I don't know if I've ever met a person who doesn't have a ton of respect for Bill Ball who's ever been there. Anybody outside of the state of New Hampshire, this means nothing to you.
No, it means zero. but Bill Ball's pretty cool.
He's pretty cool. He's actually probably got some respect outside of the state of New Hampshire as well.
Yeah, probably.
But I did my internship for my master's year of education at Exeter High School, and I coached football there part-time under Bill Ball, and I actually did it my senior year of college as well, part-time. I did like a coaching internship there. So there was 2 years in a row where I was kind of part of the coaching staff, and so I got to know him on a, the 19th guy on the staff sort of way, who was there 3 days a week. But even with that, he was that generous with his time and his energy. And so he was one of the ones who reached out to Frank and talked to Frank and then told me like, hey, he is who he appears to be. But after that interview process, where we're leaving the room and he's walking me around, he's like touring me through the school, which again, this does not happen in the interview process for education. He's like, this is where you'll teach. Like, this is the weight room, like as if I got the job sort of thing. And he's like, this is what I think your schedule would be. And I was like, this is such a bizarre experience. Yeah. But he said to me in that time, he said, I do a lot of things as the principal, but the most important thing that I do is hiring. Like, this is the most important thing that I do, because if I do it well, then I can give you the freedom that I want to give you to teach. Like, if I pick the right people, then I don't need to micromanage you. I don't need to worry if you're doing things the way that you ought to be doing them, or that your kids are getting where they need to get to. And I can kind of just trust that even if you're doing something differently than I would do it, that you have the end in sight. And so then I can just support you. And like, that's, again, not a common thing in the education system, right? It's very much a top-down micromanaging. I mean, that's the education system across America. Is like, we will, as both former teachers, we both can talk about this. Like, it's just every 3 years, there's a new initiative, a new set of standards, a new way of doing things. And then you try to overhaul everything to adhere to that way of doing things, knowing full well that in 2 years, it's going to be out the window and it doesn't actually fundamentally change the way that you teach. And so to have that level of freedom was huge for me, who was coming in attempting to teach math a little bit differently than the traditional structure for math teaching in high school.
Mm-hmm. Gonna revolutionize things like Mr. Feeney did.
Like Mr. Feeney. Well, Mr. Feeney was a little bit more traditional. I was more like Mr. Turner in this way, right? Mr. Turner from Boy Meets World, right? Who assigned a comic book.
Wow. I haven't thought about Mr. Turner
Yeah, in a
probably 15 years.
Well, you're welcome for bringing you back.
Remember when Sean joined a cult?
Yeah. They got real in that show. They didn't play
really
games. They didn't play games. And then Mr. Turner got in the bike accident. Yeah, so it was also really cool because there were a few other teachers when I started there that are still there, who were kind of in the same boat as me in like, hey, we don't really want to do this the same way that it's always been done.
Mm-hmm.
We want to try to embrace some of this new kind of wave of teaching and so I got there and I had the space to kind of do things the way that I wanted to do them. So the traditional math classroom, and this is the one that I grew up in for basically my entire high school career, aside from one class, and I had moments of it in other classes with really good teachers, but the traditional structure was lecture practice. That was kind of how it is. So like, there's a book, and it's like, all right, so today we're doing section 2.3, which is linear equations. Teacher goes to the board and they're doing either like just kind of walking through it. They have it on the slideshow, whatever it is. And they're walking through basically the book, right? They're writing the book on the board, for lack of a better way of doing it. Here are the definitions. Here are the examples. You write them down. So you're basically rewriting the book in your notebook.
Yeah.
And then you do some practice problems. And then for homework, you do 1 through 35 odd. And that was how, and then you had a quiz halfway through the unit. And then you had a test at the end of the unit.
Mm-hmm.
That was basically how all math classes were run. That was how they were run for a long, long time. And to be fair, that got me interested in being a math teacher. Mm-hmm. So that's not a wrong way of doing things necessarily. It was something where I wanted to try to do things differently. And then when we were talking about in the last episode, the 5 lessons of 5 years of teaching, and I was talking about this and like my arrogance as a 22-year-old, where arrogant 22-year-old rubbed people wrong was I didn't have the perspective to say, hey, some people might actually learn well that way. Right. I went the other direction where I was like, that's a terrible way for teaching. It's useless. And anybody who does that way is just not doing it. And that's just not exactly the way to go about doing things, because it's not true. Like for some people that works really well. I learned fairly well that way. That was how it was in college. And that's just kind of how it went. So there is benefit to doing it that way. However, this is where I felt strongly about it, particularly with the classes that I was teaching. So up until my last year, I think this is accurate, maybe the year before my last year. So 3 years, my first 3 years of teaching, I taught we had 2 levels of classes, basically. We had open and we had honors. So there were honors level or AP, honors or AP. And then there was open, which was basically everybody else. My second to last year, I think I taught 1 or 2 honors classes. My last year, I taught a couple of honors classes. And I had to do honors classes differently. Like I had to progress away from it because of the pacing of it. I had to do more traditional lecture practice sort of thing because there's only so much space that you can develop in that setup for discovery when you're trying to accomplish something on a timeline. Where you're like, we have to get through all of this information. I can't spend 3 lessons for you to discover this on your own. When I could just tell it to you in 4 minutes. And then you figure out and then we do the next thing. So that was a little bit of a learning experience for, again, arrogant 24-year-old, a 25-year-old Jeff at this point. like, oh, not everything is hunky-dory and we got to do this a little bit differently. However, I still tried to do this structured, but particularly with open level classes, because most of these kids were not going to go and major in something in college that was anywhere in the STEM fields: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. They were going to be, most of them were not going to go into one of those things. They were probably going to go to a college potentially, but they weren't. They were maybe going to take their required math class in college and then do something else with their lives. And so it was less essential for them to be like, okay, you have this requisite knowledge, but it was more important for them to have a set of skills to apply to certain situations. So this is a long walk to get where we're going, and I know we're not surprised. I told Amy before one of our recordings of this that I was like, this is going to be quick, and then she laughed at me.
Well, because I don't want you to lie to the public. It's not kind.
It's not kind. I try, but I'm also not brief.
You are a long-winded. You're a long-winded person.
Yeah, I am. Well, in this setting, I can be. Like, I have to force myself to be short-winded. That's not a phrase.
Are there settings where you're not long-winded?
I have to be, when I do like reels and stuff like that on Instagram, I have to be like under 90 seconds. That's difficult for me. And poor Olivia, who's listening to this and making the notes on it, has to take my 10-minute rambling and cut it down to 90 seconds because I just hit record and I just talk to my phone. And
so what you're saying is you're still long-winded, but Olivia fixes it. Makes it sound
that's valid. A lot of the minutes though are me trying to say what I'm trying to say in the way that I'm trying to say it. So I posted something yesterday about walking.
That was a good one.
It was 12 minutes was the raw video that I sent to her. At least 7 minutes of it was me trying to say the same line over and over and over again because I couldn't say it like in one take without screwing it up. Where I was like, I would get 3/4 of the way through and I'm like, what am I trying to say? It was so frustrating. And for anybody who's going to tell me to script it out,
it doesn't sound the same.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It takes me almost more time to script it out than it does.
So what you're saying is Olivia is doing the Lord's work by taking what you are giving her and making it succinct.
If you wanted like a summation of the business, yes, that's exactly what it is. Olivia's takes like, hey, I think this could be good. And then she'll like send me exactly what I had in mind. Like I sent her 2 days ago. I was like, hey, I want to do a program. Like I want to give away a 6-week program, which I'm going to do on Monday. Just like a 6-week strength training program. It's just going to be the one from the holiday fat loss challenge that I ran.
That was great set.
So it was like, hey, I'm going to do that. And so I'm going to take that and I'm going to put it out. But I was like, hey, can you take that, put it into a new thing, put these few podcast episodes linked in there, write an intro. And she just like, hey, this is the first draft of it. And so then I can go in and be like, all right, I'm just going to tweak 5 words and it's done. Just doing I need a better name for her, but chaos coordinator is executive Jeff Fixer.
Wrangler?
Yeah, Wrangler is her name. Wow. So shout out Olivia who's listening right now. So the idea behind what I realized with this is, let's just give an example. When was the last time anybody listening used the quadratic formula?
Yesterday. Kidding.
Probably in your junior high school math class in Algebra 2. That was probably the last time you used it.
Yeah, Mr. Sugarman's class was the last time I used that. And I majored in math in college. Did not use it in college.
Nope. But you probably could still at least come close to reciting it, or like you at least had it memorized for the time being.
Back then, yeah.
But the question is, for me, this is the best example of it, is like, why would that be necessary? For me to have my students memorize this formula, which one, they can Google, right? Like but two, like they probably aren't going to use. That doesn't mean, though, that the quadratic formula is useless or learning it doesn't have value. So the question became, what am I trying to get them to learn through this process with the quadratic formula? And the thing that we were trying to learn was how to approach a problem. Figure out, what do I, because the challenge with the quadratic formula, beyond like the very first time you learned it, was you had to get the equation to like look like something you could use the quadratic formula on. Or it was a word problem and you had to write the equation to then use the quadratic formula. That was the challenge. Using the formula was just arithmetic.
Right. It was plug and play, essentially.
It was plug and play at that point. So like that part is not the challenge and not really where the value is. The value is in the process to get it to be something like you know how to solve. So that was always the question that I asked students, is like, what do we have to do to this problem to make it look like a problem that we know how to solve? Because right now this looks crazy and gross. So what are, like, let's just throw some math at it. Just some things that we know are math, that are legal math moves, and let's just see what happens and see if we can make it move closer to what we're trying to do. If I have a word problem, let's just do some things. Let's write down what we know. Let's see if we can make something appear that looks like something we might know how to solve through the process. And so that problem solving skill was actually the long-term value of the quadratic formula process, or anything really that we learned. Because, and so like my kids would have the quadratic, I would write it on the board for them before the test, because I'm like, I don't care if you memorize this.
Right.
That's not a good use of your brain space. What is important is the process for you to get it to look like that. And if you plug everything into this and then you just don't know how to square something, okay, I'll teach you how to use a calculator. You know what I mean? Like that's a calculator issue. Like I could teach a monkey how to do the quadratic formula on the calculator. But the process to get to that would be challenging to teach to a monkey. Not to belittle what's happening, but the evolved thinking, the long-term thinking is problem solving versus solution based. And what the hardest part of teaching for me was getting students to buy into that. Because in math, because of how math classes have been run for a long, long time, it was always about getting to the right answer. And math, different from English or history and even some sciences, there is a right answer. Like there is a solution that it's binary. It's right or it's wrong. Now your process could be, you know what I mean? But that was part of why I wanted, like when I told you I kind of wanted to go down the English route, was because there was the nuance to it and we could do a little bit of the discovery. And I didn't love the idea of it being either right or wrong, because I knew that if we're searching for the right answer, that everything else before that is going to be hard to see as valuable. So what we're thinking about here is bringing it back to fitness and all of this. Is we oftentimes get caught up in the solution, right? Like I want the answer. What are my calories? What is the workout? What are my macros? How many steps should I be doing? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What's the right answer for me so that I get an A.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for lack of better, the results I'm looking for, right? The results I'm looking for in my class is a good grade. The results I'm looking for in fitness is whatever the goal is, right? I want to lose the weight. I want this number on the scale. And we can get caught up in, I want the right answer to get me there. And we fail to recognize that there's a world outside of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And that the value of getting an A in my sophomore geometry class beyond the very here and now is very little.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't carry anything with you beyond that. Now, that's impossible to tell to a 15-year-old and have them buy into it. But it's the same thing for adults. Let's just take weight loss as an example. If your sole goal or relationship with exercise, nutrition, movement, the scale, any of it, the gym, anything in this category, if
Mm-hmm.
your sole relationship with that has always been centered around hitting a specific number on the scale and losing weight, what do you do when you hit that number?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I got the A in the class.
Now I'm done.
Now I'm done. And I haven't actually learned anything. All I
Mm-hmm.
learned was how to get an A in Mr. Dalzell's class.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next year, you show up for a new math class and you have to relearn basically everything. And it's a challenge all over again. Versus if I learn, regardless of the results, right? If I learn the process, if I develop the problem solving skills of how to approach a problem, then I'll likely end up with a good grade in the class, but I'll also have those skills for outside of the class. Whether
Mm-hmm.
it's in another math class, another class, outside of school, like problem solving is a skill that we actually all use. If I were to ask you, hey, I asked you when was the last time you used a quadratic formula, you said 20 years ago. When
Mm-hmm.
was the last time you solved a problem? You'd probably say 45 minutes ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
When there was a problem and you had to take in the information, you had to figure out what you had, and you had to figure out, what can I do? What are the options of things that I could do? And
Mm-hmm.
are any of those things moving me toward a problem that I actually know how to solve? Because every
Mm-hmm.
problem is unique, but they have general structures to them. And the same thing is true on our fitness journey.
Mm-hmm.
If I just do what is necessary to lose weight, when I lose the weight, I haven't actually developed any skills beyond that specific goal. I know now how to lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I know. I don't know how to that. Now there might be some things that you learn along the way, but if you don't focus on that, if your only focus is on the solution, did I get the right answer? Did I lose the weight? And you
Mm-hmm.
skip out on everything else, which is what my 15-year-old high school math students were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I get there, I have nothing to show for it aside from the fact that I lost the weight. And then what ends up happening is a new problem comes my way, like
Mm-hmm.
life gets busy or life happens more than just busy,
Mm-hmm.
right? God forbid you lose a loved one, you lose a job, you know what I mean? Like life situations happen, and the things that you did, you haven't learned how to solve problems. You haven't learned the skills necessary to maintain what you have achieved.
Interestingly, kind of bringing it back to math, about 10 years ago, there was a study done on comparing kids' math learning to the kids who got the problem right the first time, and then
Mm-hmm.
the kids who got the problem wrong, had to go back and look at their thinking, had to relearn something, and then got it right the second time. The
Yeah.
brain elasticity of that second group was 3 times what it was at the first group, so that they were carrying all of that stuff they had to redo. They were carrying those skills forward because of they had to go through a little bit more work, and were not just focused on I got it right. They were focused on I got it wrong, but let's see why I got it wrong and try to figure out where I need to relook at this problem. And it was just really impressive. So I always thought about that when I was looking at my groups of math kids who I always had the group who would get things right the first time. And I'm like,
Yeah.
cool, but like, what are you learning? If you already
Mm-hmm.
knew the skill, you're not learning anything.
Yeah.
And then I had the other group. My kids were always split into 3 groups. I did like a workshop model.
Yeah.
So my students were split into 3 groups. So those kids who got it right the first time, I would just have them do whatever the lesson was first before they even came to me. Because I'm like, you don't need me. You've shown that. But the other kids, we would work and we would go through these problems in a totally different way than I'd ever taught before. And they were coming out of it knowing way more than group A.
Yeah.
Because they had to. They had to put in the work.
The idea, I mean, yeah, it sounds cliche to say it, but cliches are cliches for a reason. Like, you learn more from failure than you do from success.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be able to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
That's the challenge.
No one is okay with yet.
Mm-hmm. That's the real challenge. And so, like, again, I'll come back to the classroom here for a second. When I posed a problem, so like, I would try to give like real life problems. Like, we're doing an experiment and you're going to come up with the answer. Like, there is no answer in the back of the book. Mm-hmm. So we did, when we're doing like parabolic arcs. So we had this little cannon with like a little smaller than a ping pong ball size ball, but it would shoot this ball. And so you would it would have different angles and you would shoot this ball. And we did it where we did a couple of experiments. They got some data. And then I was like, okay, this is your angle. All right. This group, you have a 45-degree angle. This group, you have a 60-degree angle. This group, you have a 30-degree angle. I'm going to place a plastic cup wherever you tell me to. And you get an A if the ball launches into the cup. Mm-hmm. Like, that's an uncomfortable place for them to be. Mm-hmm. Because that's nothing like anything they had done before. Mm-hmm. But they had all of the skills, right? But they had to like pull from a lot of different things. They had to use trigonometry. They had to use the parabolic equation. They had to use, some relative stuff and all of these things. What's gravity? Mm-hmm. All of these things. And then they had immediate feedback.
Mm-hmm. It was either in the cup or it wasn't.
It was either in the cup or it wasn't.
Yeah.
And they had to be able to be uncomfortable. Like, why is this wrong? And I couldn't even look at what they did and be like, there's where your number is. I would have to go line by line and figure out what they did if I was trying to decipher it. And so it's not like I could be like, hey, look at how I did it. Mm-hmm. Did you do what I did? Did you get the right answer? And the kids had a really hard time with that. Now, hindsight, they enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. And they looked back on it and they were like, that was a cool thing. But in the moment, like, kids complained about this. I'm like, you're complaining about like this? You know what I mean? Like, they were like, can we just do problems in the book? And I'm like, no, we're not going to do problems in the book because that's comfortable.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to bet your high achievers were the ones who were least comfortable.
They were having a really hard time. Mm-hmm. Like, my A students that were just like, we just do what we're told, right? They had learned how to be good students.
Yes.
Not necessarily learned anything other than how to be good students. And I forget who said this, but the phrasing of it was really powerful. And it might be a little bit dramatic, but it was the thing. If all I'm teaching you to do is do what I do on this problem, then I'm just teaching somebody how to be a line cook at McDonald's.
Yeah, teaching how to be compliant.
Do this repetitive thing, just with a slightly different variation on it. Mm-hmm. But if you want to be able to solve actual problems and do real things, then you need to be able to face a different situation and handle it. So let's take weight loss as a for instance.
Mm-hmm.
If my weight loss plan, anybody can lose weight if they only eat pre-prepped meals that you planned ahead of time. You know what I mean? You never eat
Mm-hmm.
out. You never have a celebration. You never
Mm-hmm.
get sick. You never have a kid get sick. The weather's always nice, so you can go
Oh,
outside and you have a
yeah.
perfect, you know what I mean? Like,
You can walk.
it,
You can do all of the things.
everybody could be
Yeah.
successful in a vacuum. This is how
Mm-hmm.
the Biggest Loser works,
Yeah.
by the way,
Because
right? Like,
they're not allowed to leave.
it's handed to them. There's
Mm-hmm.
somebody living there with them and
Yep.
telling them, do this, don't do this.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody could lose weight that way. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying that that's inherently a bad thing, but unless you develop the skills necessary to handle it when life throws you off, because
Mm-hmm.
it happens 100% of the time. It's
Mm-hmm.
my guarantee. I say it before anybody works with me. I'm like, I guarantee you, this is my promise to you. This is going to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not willing to navigate hard, then you will never find success with me. Because I'm not going to do this in a way that's like only do like, here's your perfect meal plan, adhere to it, because you might lose weight that way. But then when you're not on that meal plan anymore
You don't
and
know how to be.
you don't know how to be, what happens if
Mm-hmm.
you go out to dinner?
Well, you panic and order a salad.
You order a salad, but you're like,
You
there are
don't
some
enjoy
places, or there's some places where the salads are more calories than, you know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I got a salad. It's like, well, you got a salad with 1,000 calories worth of stuff on it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not, or you just don't go. That's even more heartbreaking is
Yeah.
like people just like don't do things because they're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what happened with me all the time. This is my story.
Mm-hmm.
I would lose weight on a restrictive diet plan
Mm-hmm.
where I ate the same 3 meals. It was tilapia and broccoli. It
Ugh.
was a salad with chicken on it.
Fine.
And it was egg whites in the morning for breakfast. And literally anybody would lose weight on that. And I ate it all the time for, 3 months. And I worked out 6 days a week. But if I missed one workout and then I tried to make it up and I couldn't make it up, and then I bump it to the next Monday, it threw me off. I'd be like, I might as well screw the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't know how to adapt the workout schedule. I didn't know how to adapt the eating plan. Oh, I ruined it. I ruined my progress.
Might as well order a pizza.
Might as well order a pizza. That's the kid who doesn't understand how to apply one thing and they fail a test, which
And then
happened.
They give up.
They give up because they're like, I can't figure this out. Or it's not even they fail a test. It's like they don't know how to do one problem and they don't have the skills necessary to figure out how to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have the resilience necessary to like try again, as Daniel Tiger says. Like my son today, literally right before nap, they're all home today, and he's doing this thing where he climbs up onto the windowsill. So his knees are on the windowsill. He's holding onto the window, and then his sister comes up behind him and like grabs him and pulls him off the windowsill onto this. It's called a nugget. It's basically just a bunch of couch cushions.
Mm-hmm.
And they like roll down the nugget. And they did that for, I don't know, 10 minutes. But one time she pulls him off and they like miss the nugget basically and fall to the floor and he hurts his arm.
Mm.
And I go over and I'm like, hey, you okay? And he was fine, right? He just bumped his arm and it hurt.
Yeah.
It scared him. And I was like, hey, maybe that's not the best idea you've ever had. And he was like, I want to keep doing it. I was like, well, bud, if you keep doing it, like you might fall and hurt yourself. He's like, I want to try again.
Oh.
I'm like, you know what, buddy? Go for it. Like, I'm not going to stop you from trying something and figuring it out. And so then they did it, but they learned from it and they like went slower and he kind of like guided her the direction that he wanted to go. So he wasn't ever close to it and they didn't fall again. But the resiliency to like keep trying and to keep going when you don't get it the first time is a necessary skill for sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And when we think about losing weight, as an example, or any fitness goal, right? It's the sticking with it is, we've talked about consistency trumps everything else.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about the skills necessary to do that, right? We think about nutrition, right? There's the solution, the quadratic formula is, here are your calories, here is your protein goal, here's your fiber goal, just do it. Do the
Mm-hmm.
thing. The workouts are, here's the workout program. Here's your step target. Do the sleep. Those aren't inherently bad things, right? Just like the quadratic formula is not a bad thing. It's not something that you shouldn't know how to use. But it's a tool that you use to navigate when you have a certain situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't give my clients calorie targets. Maybe ever, but certainly not for the first 5-6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't have the skills yet to do it, most of them. Now, some of them do, but like, why would you, if you have no clue what you're eating, you just kind of eat, and you're like, I eat pretty well, but you have no clue what you're eating. How is it helpful for you to then try to adhere to what feels like an arbitrary standard when you have no consistency with what you're eating?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you might have one day where you eat 1,500 calories and another day where you eat 3,000 calories, and you don't really notice the difference between those two. So why does it make sense for me to say, all right, try to eat 1,800 calories in a day? And you're like, I don't even know how many I eat.
Mm-hmm. I remember when you and I were training together at the beginning, I wasn't really expecting it when I started with you, because, when you do any of the other, I never worked with a trainer before, but when you do any of the other published plans, whatever, they tell you your calories that you should be doing.
Yep.
And you didn't. You were just like, I want you to take pictures of what you're eating.
Yep.
And just show me that. And then I was like, what? I'm baffled as to why am I doing this? And it was like 5 or 6 weeks in that you're like, okay, here's why. And it was more of you needed to see and understand what you were taking in before we could diagnose not really diagnose, it's the wrong word, but before we could really pick apart what is working and what's not.
Well, what happened in those 6 weeks too?
But so many things. I don't know. This was a long time ago.
Well, but think about, what did you observed?
I did.
A lot of things about your food just by taking the pictures.
And I plated things differently because I knew that someone was going to be looking at it. So I was like, I'm putting more vegetables on the plate than I normally would eat because Jeff's going to see this. So I became a lot more conscious of the makeup of my plate. Yeah.
You started doing things that you needed to do anyway, that were going to move you toward where you needed to be. You started eating more vegetables. You started eating more protein because you looked at your plate and you were like, there's no protein on this plate.
That's mostly carbohydrates.
Right? Or it gave you it gave you a pause before being like, am I going to have this Snickers bar? Because if I do, I need to log it. And so it wasn't that you didn't ever take pictures of those things. And it wasn't like I ever berated you when you did.
Never,
but
ever.
It was a moment where you were like, do I actually want this? It was that right turn on red scenario. Like, it's a red light. Do I actually want to go? Are there any cars coming? If I'm good, then I'm going to go, and that's fine. But like, let's just take a second to consider this before I just do it. Right? This is the difference between like paying cash for something or just swiping your credit card. Right? You pay cash and it hurts a little bit. You swipe your credit card and you're like, it's fake money. And then you
Apple
look at
Pay is even worse.
Yeah, and you just like, it's fake money, and then you just are like, oh, okay, like that's why Amazon's a real problem, because people like have their Amazon on their phone, right, and their credit card's already loaded, and all you have to do is just hit a button and do it, which is brilliant by them.
Yes,
right.
That's why they're a multi-billion-dollar company.
Wicked low barrier to entry, but like, you could buy anything without ever having to go get your credit card.
Do you need any Eclipse goggles? Because I have 8 extra pairs.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
You can only buy them in giant sets.
So the idea is, when we're doing the process, and again, this comes back to process versus results, but like falling in love with but like, and then considering some of the things along the way wins, because that was the last piece for me with teaching. It was one thing for me to be like, hey, gang, I really want you to, embrace this process. But if I graded them the same way as anybody else graded them, then there's no incentive for them to actually do that because they still need the answer. So, like, if I had a problem on a test, the problem might be worth 5 points. The answer is worth 1 point. But writing the correct equation, doing these couple of steps, right? Each of these are a different point. And so you could get 3 points and not even write an answer down. Or you could write the right answer down and only get 1 point out of 5. And there are people who are rolling over in their graves, being like, well, if I can do it in my head, I'm like, I don't care if you can do it in your head. That's fine. I want to see
your thinking.
But your thinking. It's not even that I need to see your thinking. It's that the thinking is part of the thing I'm grading you on. Because the answer very rarely matters. You think about this in life. I'll do marriage for a moment. My wife comes home to me. My wife comes home to me and she's got a problem, whatever the problem is. The least important thing, and I've learned this in marriage and I still struggle with it, the least important thing to her is the answer.
Yep, we don't want you to solve our problems.
Now, I want to solve the problem, right? Guys want to solve it. But like the least important thing to her is the answer. Now, that's maybe part of it. That might be part of the equation. That might be part of the conversation is let's come up with a solution together. But if we skip all of the intermediate stuff, then we actually haven't done the work that's necessary. Or you think about in your job, right? I'll use Olivia as an example because this is really, if I just said I want X and I have not shown her the process to get to X, then I can't be upset when X is all of a sudden not right. When even if she got it right a few times, if I didn't show her the process of it, then when it's slightly different, then why would she be upset that it, or like understand what I'm thinking about? Like, let's take the long 10-minute things that I record as an example. I like showed her the process of how I cut them down. I gave her, this is the app that I use. This is how I go about doing it. These are some examples. I like screen recorded, and then she did a couple and I gave her some feedback. And then she did a few more and she gave some feedback. And so now I don't even have to I do watch the edits that she sends me when she does them, but I know that she's going to get it right. But I know she's going to get it right because I know that she knows the process so well. Because she learned the skills so that every time when I just come up with a bunch of random stuff, she knows what is the message that I'm trying to get across. Because she's watched enough of my videos. She's been embedded in the business long enough that she knows what the message is. And so she can be like, that part's not important. It's not that it's bad, but if we're cutting 10 minutes down to 90 seconds, we're going to have to cut some stuff that might be good. So what's the essential stuff for the story? But that's a skill that's developed through not being concerned about the outcome. The outcome is part of it, but the process is essential. And so finding wins along the way in your fitness journey, I just had this conversation the other day. I had 2 conversations with clients in the last week. So I had one client who just had a really, really tough week last week with of parenting. Just her kid was going through some stuff and she was just carrying a lot of the burden of that, which every parent does fairly frequently, right? And she was like, I just, I wasn't able to track. Like right now, she's probably 8-10 weeks in. We decided for her to track her calories for a little bit, because for a short period of time, again, to get information about the process and then be able to adjust the results. That's like showing your work, right? Like, hey, you're not getting the right answer, quote unquote, the right answer, but I don't know what work you're doing. So I don't know what your process looks like. I don't know if you're approaching the problem correctly. So let's show your work for a little bit, and then we can figure out where the hole is. And so she was in the process of tracking for a couple of weeks. She didn't track that week because it was a little bit too much for her to handle in that moment. But she still ate well, because she had the skills already of like, hey, all of my meals had a protein and a vegetable and a quality carbohydrate in there. I don't know how much of those things they had, but they all had them. I still walked 8,000 steps at least every day. I still got my strength training in every day. So I turned down the volume a little bit on what I was doing, but I could still hear the song. I wasn't so laser focused, but it was like I got 90% of the way there and I just didn't see the thing. So if you show me your work and in the quadratic formula, you put +4 instead of -4, and that gave you the wrong answer, but everything else went right, you're going to get 4.5 out of 5 points. Versus if you do the right answer, but none of the rest of the stuff, you're going to get 1 out of 5 points. Because again, if it's all about the solution, right, you can do it perfectly, but then when you don't get the right answer, you have nothing else to fall back on. When you can't follow the meal plan perfectly, when you can't follow the exercise plan perfectly, when you can't walk the appropriate amount of steps, when kids are sick or people are home or whatever it is, and you can't do it exactly how you always have done it, and you don't have the skills to adapt, like, hey, this doesn't look like the quadratic formula. Well, maybe if you just moved this number from this side of the equation over to that side of the equation, it would. If you don't have the skills to be able to adapt to the scenarios, then you will forever be left with, I'm either right or I'm wrong, and there's no in between. I either lost the weight and I'm where I want to be, or I'm not. And that's how you get on the fitness roller coaster.
It's not a fun ride. Oh.
No. It sucks. I gained and lost the same 15 pounds for 6 years. I'd be shredded out of my gourd, and then I'd be not. And then I'd be shredded out of my gourd, and then I'd be not. But it was either I was doing it perfectly or I was not doing it at all. And the reason why is not like people bang on the all or nothing mentality. And it comes from the fact that we focus on the solution and not on the skills that we're developing, which is, hey, what does it look like to be aware of what I'm eating? What does it look like? Skills that I'm developing could be things like, hey, I'm preparing my food. Hey, I'm aware. I know how to plate my food that has the main things that I want on there. Every plate should have a fiber source, a carbohydrate source, and a protein source, and fat in and around that if you want to. Right? So I can still look at a plate, and even if it's a quote unquote like unhealthy meal, right? I could have pizza. I go out to pizza with my family because I have no food, but I'm going to get a salad with chicken on it, and then I'm going to have pizza. What did I have? I had fiber via the lettuce. I had protein via the chicken, and I had carbs and fat via the pizza. Were they ideal? No, but I was able to get most of the way there. I was able to get a 4 out of 5 because I developed the skills and I knew some things I could do. And I would tell kids, they're like, I don't know how to solve this problem. I'm like, just throw math at it. Like, literally do anything you know how to do. If you do something you know how to do, there's a chance that you'll come up with something that is worth something, and you might come to the next solution. So when you're faced with a problem in your fitness journey, just start doing stuff that you know how to do. And if all you know how to do is follow a plan to a T, then you're screwed. But if you develop some skills, on things that you can do that aren't perfection.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, I don't have an hour to do a workout. How could I do a decent workout in 15 or 20 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Don't
have
take the
access
zero.
to the gym isn't open today. The gym is actually, or it wasn't open at the beginning of the day today. What can I do? Well, I can do some stuff at home.
Mm-hmm.
I can walk. I didn't prep my food for the week. What can I do? Well, I can go get this food from takeout that
Mm-hmm.
is better than this other option from takeout. It's if I develop some of these skills, then I'm throwing I'm throwing math at it. I'm doing things I know how to do. And I might not get 100% of the problem correct every single time. But the kids who did well in my class they might have gotten if you got every single problem wrong on a test of mine, in terms of, you didn't get a single answer right, but you threw math at it and you got most of the way there, you still passed the class. Because those were skills worth having.
Mm-hmm.
Problem solving, resilience, perseverance, creativity.
Those are all
Those
those
are
soft skills
skills.
that are so underrated.
They're necessary. They're
Mm-hmm.
necessary to success in anything, but particularly
Mm-hmm.
in the fitness space where we really get into like it has to be this way. Nobody, let me repeat, nobody hits their calories and macros every single day. Not even the most ripped bodybuilders in the world do this.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. And the only people who come close are those people who do it professionally, or actors, right, who are paid millions of dollars and have a studio paying for a personal chef
Personal
and a
chef.
nutrition coach and
Right.
a trainer, and their job all day every day is to look as good as they possibly can. Like right now, Jake Gyllenhaal is the standard right now in Roadhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Just got absolutely scorched out of his mind.
Yeah.
Like, you don't do that if you're not literally being paid to do it. But it's the Biggest Loser.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys are the Biggest Loser Hollywood edition, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where somebody is gift wrapping it for them.
Mm-hmm.
And you, me, anybody, if a studio paid for it, and what's the Rob, whatever his name is, Rob McElhenney from Always Sunny in
Oh
Philadelphia
God, I
had a
loved
post
him.
about this when he got
That's
really,
right.
really ripped. He had a post about it. He's like, I don't know why people don't do this. All you have to do is have a studio pay for it, work out every day for a year and a half, have a personal chef, and all these things. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm.
And he's making fun of the fact that, like, he got absolutely ripped,
Mm-hmm.
but all he had to do was show up.
Yep. Someone else was doing all the work for him.
And he really didn't even have to make the decision to show up. You know what I mean? Like, it was his job to show up.
Yeah.
So comparing yourself to people at this level is unrealistic, first of all, but it's also not necessary to do that because most of us don't have somebody gift wrapping it for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so the essential skills for us are finding ways to solve problems, make problems that we don't know how to solve look like problems we do know how to solve. I don't know what I'm going to eat. What are some things that you could eat? What are the things that are important to eat? I need some protein. I need some fiber.
Mm-hmm.
How can I get them? It doesn't have to be outstanding,
Mm-hmm.
right? It could be the poor man's version of it, but like, I could drink a protein shake with some strawberries in it
Mm-hmm.
and have a bowl of cereal. Is that an ideal dinner? Of course it's not. But that's better than throwing caution to the wind and saying, oh, I can't have exactly what I was supposed to have, so I might as well, I'm screwed. I've ruined everything.
Might as well go get a burger and fries.
Yeah. No, it doesn't mean that you can't ever do those things, but that's also a soft skill, is learning, hey, the SAT, this will be where we finish. The SAT became the standardized test for juniors while I was a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the state mandated test for juniors. And so every year, all of our juniors sat for a day during school. It was like a school day. All the juniors sat and took the SAT, which was great because when I was in school, I had to go in on a Saturday morning,
Saturday.
which was brutal.
Yep.
Like I was late to a playoff game for baseball because I had a playoff game and I had already signed up to take SATs that day. So I had to like get driven to the game, and I got there in the second inning, which was very much frowned upon by my coach, which was like, I don't know what you want me to do. Yeah. But SATs became that. And the thing about the SATs is you don't get every question. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't even need to get every question to get an 800. So the conversation becomes like, let's pick which questions we're going to, like when I'm talking about strategies with the kids, I'm like, all right, they're going to like the test writers are jerks. Mm-hmm. They're going to intentionally try to trick you to make you look over here. But what you're trying to do is like, hey, what are the things that I know? And also when you're looking at the questions, like, what are the things that I can skip? What are the ones that I'm like, that's going to take too much time. I'll come back to that if I want to. Like, that's not a fight that I'm going to have right now. You pick your spots. There's certain times where it's like, listen, this is just not, I'm going to go out. My wife and I had a date night the other night. The idea that on that scenario, I'm going to try to find like a quote unquote healthy meal, like that's just not a spot to pick my fight. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm just going to not and recognize that I don't need to be perfect in order to still be really successful. But I can focus on the things that I know that I can nail, which are the other 6 times I ate that day, which were on point. And I was able to do them without much thinking. Because, again, I developed the skills that I needed to develop. So this is like another take on the all or nothing mentality, right? But from a different space, right? Like, it's very common for fitness coaches to talk about like, hey, we can't have an all or nothing mentality. But what are we talking about? The reason why we have an all or nothing mentality is because we don't know gray. And we're not comfortable with gray. We're not comfortable with not doing it right. But the winning is in the process. The winning is in the gray. Because that's what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Because that's the final thing. If your relationship with food and exercise and everything like that has always been around losing weight, then you lose the weight and you don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. It's just like my kids who have always just tried to get an A, and then they get the solution and they got the A in the class, and then they get to college and they're faced with a problem and they don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. Because they never figure out how to solve problems. They never figure out how to do it if they're not doing the perfect plan. Losing weight, getting the right answer, that's not the hard part. It's the least interesting part of the process. It's good. It's like, it's the outcome. It's something that we want to pursue.
Right. And it's the point that society has always celebrated. So
100%, right? Like, hey, what'd you get on your test?
Yeah, you got an A. Oh, you're amazing.
You got an A.
I lost 15 pounds. Oh, you're amazing.
Fantastic. You could lose 15 pounds from a stomach bug.
Yeah.
You could lose 15 pounds because your mental health's not in a great place and you're not eating. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, losing weight is not necessarily an indicator that you're doing everything right. Mm-hmm. Just like getting an A isn't necessarily an indicator that you're doing everything right. You just mind, like, if I was just multiple choice, right? You could just guess, make educated guesses and get a lot of things right. But the thing that keeps you being successful and maintaining your progress and not being on the roller coaster is when you learn how to live in the gray. And you learn the skills you need. And it's not about the solution. It's not about the right answer. It's not about these are the perfect calories and these are the perfect macros. Those could be part of it. That could be part of it. Like, you do need the quadratic formula to solve some of these problems. You do. But it is the least interesting part of the process. Mm-hmm.
Because Aerosmith said it best. life's a journey, not a destination.
Well, there you go.
Thank you, Steven Tyler.
But embrace the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Embrace the journey, because that's where you're going to do the journey forever. The things that you do to lose weight are also the things that you do to maintain weight loss. The only thing that's different is the number of calories that you're eating. We've talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
The things that you do to get the right answer in a math class are the things that you do to get the right answer in your next math class, or in a science class, or in your job. You just apply the skills differently. So hopefully this was helpful. I don't know if it was, but that was
I think it was. I liked it. I like them all. I'm not picky.
That was my education soliloquy.
You should have been an English teacher. You and these words.
All about it.
Ubiquitous, soliloquy. You didn't use ubiquitous today. I'm kind of disappointed.
I didn't. I probably could have found a way.
You definitely could have found a way.
I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to overdo it. You gotta find the moments to do it. But appreciate y'all listening. If you made it this far, subscribe, rate, review, all the things. Shoot me a message with any questions that you have, anything you want to talk about, or if you want somebody to help you out with this process. Would love to chat with you about that. Talk to you soon.